Welcome back to Sailing El Haleo! This week we pick up just south of Charleston, South Carolina, where we hop back on the ICW and make our way through the swift-moving Edisto River. From there we go through a series of cuts, the Fenwick cut, the Ashepoo-Coosaw cutoff, and the Ashe Island cut, and we make our way to Beaufort, South Carolina. From there we cross Port Royal Sound and we pick up Skull Creek, where we go behind Hilton Head Island, and then we finally reach Calibogue Sound. And one of our favorite anchorages is in Bull Creek, just off of Calibogue Sound, so hopefully we'll make it that far this episode. I'm not exactly sure how far we'll make it, but I guess it depends on how much I blabber. So we might as well go ahead and get right into it. Grab a drink, climb aboard, and let's get going. After spending the night in Church Creek, just south of Charleston, South Carolina, there was one other boat there that night with us. It was a couple from Canada. We waved and had a little chat when we went by, and they also had a puppy dog, which is always kind of fun. And I'm actually kind of surprised at the number of boats you see from Canada going up and down the ICW. It seems like about every fourth boat is from Canada, which is actually pretty darn cool. They must have a pretty strong maritime history up in there. I know, like up in Nova Scotia and those areas, and I'm probably talking out of my ass, but it seems like Canadians have an attachment to the sea, and maybe I'm just completely wrong about that. But if you're Canadian, drop a comment. Let me know about you wacky Canadians and your boats. But anyway, we got up early the next morning because we were making our way down the Edisto River, and the current through there can be really, really strong. If you're looking at a chart, one of the things I've learned to do through experience is to kind of read a chart, and I'm sure I should have known all of this before I left. I should have read it in a book somewhere, but because I'm stupid, I didn't read any books on sailing before we started. And one thing that I've learned is when you see really deep water, like on an the Edisto River, the North Edisto River has kind of a serpentine pattern to it. And if you see on the outer edges is where the water flow is going to be. And when you see a really deep channel and then a lot of shoaling on the inside corners, you know that's going to be a really strong current. So I wanted to get up really early that morning because we had about a 4-hour window where the current was going to be going. I think it was only maybe 3 hours, where the current was going to be going in the direction that we wanted to, or that we were going to be traveling in. So I wanted to get the most out of that current as I could, because going through the North Edisto River against the current can be quite a nightmare. I did that last time when I was headed north, and I was going less than a knot for about 3 hours, and it's really frustrating. So if I lose an hour of sleep and get up a little bit early so we can capitalize on the current, that's a good trade in my book. Going down the North Edisto River, there is a point where you turn off into the Dawho River, and then you're going the opposite direction of the current. So we actually made it to that point where we were going to change our direction in relation to the current. We made it within a half a mile. We were within a half a mile of it when the current changed directions, or the tides switched. So we just got lucky. It was timed perfectly. We went that last 15 minutes against the current, and then we switched to go up the Dawho River, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, and we got a boost from the tide there. And from there you go through the Watts Cut, and that takes you to the South Edisto River. And every time I've gone through the Watts Cut, I've seen boats queued up on either end of it. It is not very long. It's maybe 2 miles at the most, I would guess. And I always stick to the outer edges where I know the slightly deeper water is. And if you look at the sonar charts, it does look very shallow at low tide. There are points where it shows that it's only 5 feet. So I do see boats queued up waiting for higher tides to go through there, but I've gone through twice now at low tide, and I've never seen less than 7 feet myself. So, I don't know, maybe you don't have to wait, maybe you do, whatever. Everyone has to do what is right for them. But I've had some really good luck going through the Watts Cut at low tide. When we made it through the Watts Cut, we entered the South Edisto River, where we planned on anchoring for the evening. And one thing we started doing at this point in time, we're getting far enough south that we decided to start shifting our strategy more towards resource preservation rather than trying to cover certain distances in a day. So we did try to utilize the tides the most to our advantage. So another thing that I've noticed, and take this with a grain of salt because I am an absolute moron, this may or may not be the way that this works out, so don't take my word for it. I mean, there seems to be a correlation between the geography of the coastline and the way the tides work, I should say the extremities of the tides. So if you look at the geography of South Carolina, the southern half of South Carolina and Georgia, the actual coastline bends inward. So you have a shorter cup-like situation geographically, and you've got all of the ocean water during the tide that's trying to push into that very small area. So we have very extreme tides in South Carolina and Georgia. They can be up to 7 feet at a crack. And if you look at the geography of, say, North Carolina, like in the Pamlico Sound region, it's shaped exactly the opposite direction. It's shaped outwards, so you have a huge area where that water can filter into, and there are large bodies of water. There's the Pamlico River, Pamlico Sound, Neuse River, all of these big bodies of water that can absorb that amount of water that's coming in when the tide shifts. And that's why in those regions, they're so vast and the quantity of water is so great that the wind actually dictates the water level in those areas more than the tides, just because there's so much water volume area that it can absorb the tidal swings, whereas the geography and the volume of water that's available in Georgia and South Carolina can't absorb, or it does absorb them, just more drastically via the 7-foot tide. So I don't know if it has anything to do with the geography of the coastline. In my head it makes sense that it does. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with it and I'm just a moron. That's probably more the case. But anyway, you just try and, as I'm going, I didn't read any of this stuff. I'm just trying to put together what I observe with what's actually happening, just so if I see these circumstances in the future, that I might have some foresight as to what I can expect. When I leave the country, if I can apply some of the things that I've noticed in the rivers as far as shoaling and currents, maybe I can apply that in areas where I've never been before and maybe the charts aren't as sound. So I'm just trying to figure this stuff out, I guess is what it comes down to. So anything that I say, if you read something different in a book, go with what it says in the book. I'm still trying to figure this stuff out. The next morning we tried to time our departure with the tide so we would get a little bit of a boost down the rest of the South Edisto River, but before we entered a series of cuts that led to the Coosaw River. And these cuts, there are 3 of them, and they connect a series of rivers together. So there's the first is the Fenwick cut, that's maybe only a couple hundred yards long. We did get there right at low tide, so I saw 7 feet was the minimum depth I saw going through Fenwick cut. From there, I believe we enter the Ashepoo River, and that's fine, that's 10, 12 feet deep. And from there we went through the Ashepoo-Coosaw cutoff, and there's another little river, I don't know which one that is, you only go through a couple hundred yards of it before entering the Ashe Island cut, and that takes you to the Coosaw River. And the Ashe Island cut used to be really, really crappy. Really bad, like you absolutely had to wait until high tide to go through there. When I came through in 2022, we just barely made it when I was going through in the... When would it have been? When we were going for the winter, so it would have been in the fall. So in the fall of 2022, we went through at high tide, and we saw maybe 7 feet at the exit of the Ashe Island cut, and that was at high tide, and it's a 6-foot tide, 6 or 7 foot tide right there. So there's absolutely no water there, at low tide. So that one you definitely have to time your passage with, and The good news about that is when I was coming back north in the spring of 2023, they were actually dredging it. So they were just dredging the entrance of it. They had dredged the rest of that cut in early 2023. So when we came through this time at low tide, through that entire complex from the Fenwick cut through the Ashe Island cut, we saw two little tiny ridges that were only 7 feet deep. The rest of the way we saw at least 9 feet the entire way, and that was at low tide, so that was awesome. And once we made it through that cut complex, we hopped into the Coosaw River. By that time, the currents had switched, and we got a boost all the way up the Coosaw River where we entered the, I think it's Brickyard Creek, and from there that took us down to Beaufort, South Carolina. We ended up spending a couple of days in Beaufort, South Carolina due to rain and wind that came through, and we anchored somewhere right in the transition where Beaufort River turns into Brickyard Creek, and we hopped back on the Beaufort River, and we only had to go about 3 miles to the Ladies Island Bridge. And this was on Thanksgiving Day, so we had to get there, I believe it was by 7 o'clock, because they were running a marathon that day. The Ladies Island Bridge schedule is all over the place, so I always call them a day ahead of time from when I'm leaving to find out what their schedule is for that next day. So we knew we had to get there before 7 o'clock, so we got up super early and we left. And the bridge tender, some of them can be a little bit of drama queens, I'm not gonna lie, was giving me a little bit of shit going through, but we still had 20 minutes to make it there, so we made it through no problem. And you know, I can relate. In my former job, I was a drama queen sometimes. I think we all are from time to time. So, you know, when that stuff happens, I don't take it personally or anything. You know, I have to say probably the most important thing that I've learned in the last 3 years of doing this is, and it's going to sound stupid, and it's going to sound so simple that it's stupid, but you know, I've learned that it's not about you. Very little is about you, and when we live in our manicured lives, you know, on land, when we have a good job, we have security, you know, we want to get everything just right. We spend $120 on just the right shaped wrought iron coffee table because it's going to go in the exact spot in our house that we want it to go in. And you know, you get stuck in that mentality that it is about you, but when you're out here, you know, you're in the awe of nature. I think we're way too disconnected from nature. And when you're out here, right now, we've been stuck in Fernandina Beach for a week because of, you know, 40-mile-an-hour winds. So you just have to go with it. And you know, it's not about you. Very little in this world actually is about you. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in the mentality that everything is about you, and I know I did, and I still do. I still struggle with it. But I think when you learn that everything isn't about you, I think it changes the way that you relate to and interact with people, and I think that's a good thing. I know it has been for me. Yeah, I've repaired some relationships that probably had soured or were difficult in the past, and I think it's just learning to not be so selfish, and not everything is in your control. You can't control everything, and sometimes you just have to go with the flow, and it's not about you. So, yeah, that's that. I guess I didn't plan on going there, but you know, you learn. No, I think I'm figuring some things out, as maybe that's just a natural progression of aging. I don't know, but yeah. And now back to your regularly scheduled non-sappy crap jaunt down the Intracoastal Waterway. After making it past the Ladies Island Bridge, we continued down the Beaufort River. That leads to Port Royal Sound. And we crossed Port Royal Sound and hopped into Skull Creek, and Skull Creek leads you behind Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. And from there you can go out into Calibogue Sound, which is one of my favorite places in the ICW. It's so weird what appeals to you and what doesn't. It's just like Currituck Sound. I don't know why I like Calibogue Sound. I just really like it. A lot of places like Prince Creek, I can tell you exactly why I like it. The cypress trees, blah, blah, blah. Currituck Sound, I don't know why I hate it. Calibogue Sound, I don't know why I love it. But I always stay here for a few days when we come through. I guess maybe Currituck Sound feels like a dystopian hellhole to me, and Calibogue Sound feels like a very vibrant, upbeat place. I don't know how to describe it any better than that. Maybe Currituck Sound has bad juju, and Calibogue Sound has good juju. I don't know. But leaving Calibogue Sound, we hop on the Cooper River, and then we just take a turn to starboard and go up Bull Creek. And Bull Creek is one of my favorite anchorages. I love Calibogue Sound, and Bull Creek is just about a perfect anchorage for us. It's in a grassy area. The holding is great. The tides are not, I mean, there are strong currents in that area, but they're not too strong. And there's plenty of swing room in Bull Creek, usually, and there's room for tons of boats. We stayed there for a couple of days, and almost every day we had other boats with us, and it's just a very pleasant anchorage, and we can get wind for the wind generator, but there are no large waves. So it's just, to us, it's really kind of perfect anchorage.
In the morning when I get up, I wish that we could stop and take each day. In the evening when I get home, always hope to find you all alone and out of harm's way. Every time I look around, I hope to find you looking back at me. You're everything I ever hope to see. In the morning when I get up, I wish that we could stop and take each day. In the evening when I get home, always hope to find you all alone and out of harm's way. Every time I look around, I hope to find you looking back at me. You're everything I ever hope to see. In the morning when I get up, I wish that we could stop. I wish that we could stop.
And that's all we have time for this week. I would love to give a massive shout out to my Patreon crew, and I do have a new Patreon crew member this week, and his name is Peter Allen. And Peter had requested a list of anchorages that I used. He's going to be traveling the Intracoastal Waterway within the next few years, and he was just kind of curious where I anchored and the different places I stayed, how the holding was, and just that kind of information. So I actually went through and I put together, it's a series of 3 videos. They're about a half an hour each, and it's every anchorage that we've stayed in from Delaware City all the way down to Titusville, Florida. So if you're interested in that, it is on our Patreon page. You can sign up there and get access to that information if you're interested in seeing the places where we've anchored on the Intracoastal Waterway. And my other patron members are Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise Neely Sackett, Sherry Erickson, Deb Shaw, and Matthew Spotton, and now Peter Allen. So thank you guys so very much. Your support really means the world to me. If you are interested in joining our Patreon page, there is a link in the description down below. That'll take you to the Patreon page where there's hundreds of photos, videos, real-time updates, kind of let you know where we're at. And if you guys want any information, behind-the-scenes information like anchorages, that kind of stuff, just let me know and I'd be more than happy to get that information to you. Frank has helped me so much on my journey. I couldn't have done this without him. You know, we're built on the... I'm certainly built on the back of a giant. I couldn't have gotten this far without his help. So if anyone wants help, if any information, just let me know and I'm more than happy to provide that. So you can sign up for our Patreon there and you'll help support the channel, which would be awesome. If you do like our videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. That helps us out as well. Alrighty, I guess I hope you all are well, and I guess we'll see you next week.